Next question, only rucking in zone 2 versus shorter, intense ruck sessions for SFAS prep. Yes, that is my answer. You should do both. He included a couple of well-known people slash programs, philosophies in here that I omitted on purpose, but I am a believer that you should do some of both. For SFAS prep, when you're getting closer to SFAS, because hopefully you've built a really, really good base of running, rucking, strength, etc., you want to lean towards a little bit more intense rucks, in my experience, in my opinion. That's kind of the way I do it. But usually what that means is I'll have guys do a walking only ruck with a little heavier ruck on like the Tuesday earlier on in the week. That ruck, if you, as long as you don't go crazy heavy with it and as long as you actually only walk, should not be all that fatiguing. So you can do that after or before a pretty intense training day, whatever it may be. Usually I have my guys do repeats and lower body work at the beginning of the week. And then usually the day after I'll have them do a intense short ruck, but intense meaning a little bit heavier and walking fast, not necessarily sprinting or repeats or putting 80 pounds in a ruck and running with it, or putting 80 pounds in a ruck, period. So that would be something like a 55 to 65 pound ruck for 60 to 90 minutes or so. And you're just working on your walking pace. And then on the weekend, I like to usually do a long ruck, and starting from like the beginning of a selection prep, most of that ruck, if not all of it, will be walking. This will be a 45 to 50 pound ruck. Most, if not all, will be walking. And then slowly but surely, we'll start incorporating some running. So first week, say you do a 90-minute ruck, all walking. Second week, you do a 100-minute ruck. Out of every 10 minutes of that ruck, you can spend 2 minutes trotting. And then the following week, maybe it's a 105-minute ruck. And out of every 10 minutes of that ruck, you can spend 3 minutes running. Following week, 110-minute ruck, and every 10 minutes, you can spend 5 to 6 minutes of that walking. Or another thing I like to do is first part of the ruck, say you're doing a 120-minute ruck, so a 2-hour ruck. First 50 to 60 minutes is just walking only, working on your fast walking pace. And then the last 60 minutes, you can run as desired. However, very, very important to differentiate training rucks versus when you're getting tested on it. When you're getting tested on a ruck, it makes the most sense to use terrain to dictate whether you're running or rucking or walking. Most people aren't fit enough to run uphill. If they run uphill, especially early on in the ruck, they are going to smoke themselves. And it just makes sense to hold that to the end. You absolutely can, if you're a super stud, get to where you can run the entire ruck on like a 12-miler or whatever, but most people won't get there, and that's fine. But you want to use the terrain to your advantage. So when you're getting tested on it at selection, or if you're getting tested on throughout your career, whatever, on a 12-mile, it makes sense to use the terrain to your advantage by trotting the downhills to use gravity to kind of pull you down. And it also makes sense if you're more on the fit side to do it on flats, and it makes sense to walk uphill. In training, because running downhill with a ruck on is highly, highly stressful on the joints and will be more difficult to recover from, usually what I recommend is to limit downhill running in training. You can do a little bit of it. You should do a little bit of it occasionally in training for short periods of time, just so your first time running downhill with a ruck on is not at selection. You've been exposed to that stress before in small doses. But most of your running on training rucks should be on flats. A little bit maybe on inclines even. You can do ruck running on slight inclines. Some people can do that and be totally fine. So typically I will give my clients a no more than this amount of time ruck running downhill just to keep them recovering well and not beat the shit out of themselves. And oftentimes it's no ruck running downhill during the training ruck. Throughout the plan, at some point, they're going to do a little bit of ruck running downhill, but it won't be like early on, and it won't be very, very close to selection either, because again, it's just rough on the joints. So I like a little bit of both. I also don't hesitate to give some of my guys a ruck run brick where they go for 60 to 90 minute ruck, drop ruck, 5 to 10 minute transition into running stuff, refuel, rehydrate, and then go do a 30 to 40 minute run or whatever it may be. But a combination of ruck walking and ruck running, in my opinion, as you get close to selection, of course, basically everything I just said, this is like the last 12 weeks or so before selection. It is not 6 months out. It's not 5 months out. It's not 4 months out. Ruck running when you're 6 months out from selection is just a bad idea. It's not a good move. It is totally not worth the squeeze. You are going to set yourself up for a lot of success if you work on ruck walking before you get into your very specific selection prep, and you work on building a great running base, and you work on getting very, very strong. If you do those things, once you do get into that 12 weeks or so before selection, you're in your selection specific prep, you're going to be really fast at walking with a ruck on, and you're going to be feeling good. You're not going to be banged up already, which a lot of people are because they start ruck running way too early and they start their selection prep already banged up. It's just going to get worse and worse. But if you have a really good walking base and a really good running base and a lot of strength, once you do start ruck running, you're going to be way ahead of the pack and you're going to make drastic improvements. You're going to already be well within the standard, most likely, of what is required, 12 to 1230 miles for 12-ish miles. That's not officially required, but that's like a really good solid number to shoot for. Obviously, you can be faster than that. It's even better. But if you can ruck 12-minute miles for 12 miles, you're doing pretty good. So that's what I would recommend, a combination of both, not just one or the other. But there are lots of different ways to skin it. I just don't think that one of these is that much better than the other to such an extent that I would only stick to that one. There's nothing wrong with doing some of both. And you're going to do a lot of both at selection. Most of the rucking you do at selection by percentage, like time spent rucking, will be walking, hopefully. Hopefully you're not one of those guys that thinks you have to run during land nav. If you're accurate with your land nav and you're good and you don't get crazy lost and have to make up ground, you shouldn't have to ruck run at all during land nav. So most of that time is going to be spent walking. So if all you do in prep is ruck run really, really fast, it's going to be more fatiguing. It's going to beat you up more. And it's also just not quite going to carry over as well to all the time that you spend walking with a heavier ruck on. However, if all you do is walking, when it comes time to go crush gates, and by the way, you can do a bunch of ruck walking and stay in zone 2 and still pass gates. I always have had the mindset, and I like to cultivate this mindset with my clients. Your goal, even if you don't do it, even if it doesn't end up happening and coming to fruition, your goal should be to go and fucking crush gates. That should be your goal. You should want to put your absolute best times up. And in order to do that, the reality is you're going to have to ruck run quite a bit. You can get through the entire thing just walking and pass. I just don't think that's a great mindset. And although ruck running is definitely stressful, it beats you up, it's not longevity friendly, it's okay to do for short periods of time, like during selection prep and at selection. And then you're probably not going to need to do that again unless you go to another selection, SMU selection or whatever it may be. So that is my approach. Neither one is better than the other. They're both very valuable.